Hi and welcome back to another video, back to the Nook. Thanks for joining me here today. Today it's gonna be another kind of wrap-up video. I did mention in my previous wrap-up video that I'm not gonna do things by month as much anymore because my reading habits are just really like sporadic, so I am just gonna do them whenever I see fit. So these are gonna be the books that I have read in the past 2-ish months. Basically whatever I have read since the last time I did a wrap up. The first book that I read is The Reset: Ideas to Change How We Work and Live. This is a relatively fast read. I finished it in a day. It didn't really give me anything new, but I do think it's a good recommendation for people in the corporate world. So people who might need a little bit more of a gentler push towards rethinking work and rethinking the way that we kind of build our economy. So things like the very long working hours, or kind of the very extractive mindset that we have, a very competitive mindset that we have. I feel like this book would be great for people who are completely on the other end of the spectrum. So maybe people who have very little contact with kind of theory or questioning ideas. I also kind of feel like this book speaks to people who are corporate professionals and not really people who have been doing different jobs, or outside of that kind of professional settings. But it wasn't a bad read. I just think it was quite simple and to the point, but definitely not very substantial. Like, it doesn't really give a heavy hand to theory or anything. It doesn't really posit anything new, so that's my take on the book. But it does cover the same few interesting ideas of questioning work, questioning the way that we organize our work and our lives. But in the end, it's still about careers, and it's still about kind of being part of the economy as a productive citizen. So that is still very much a safe line of thought, I think. The next book I finished reading is Making Kin: Ecofeminist Essays from Singapore, as edited by Esther, Vincent and Angelia Poon. The ecofeminist term might make this book sound very academic, but it definitely isn't. It's just a bunch of very personal essays, and when the editors pitched this book, they wanted to just get different perspectives on gendered but also ecological perspectives in Singapore. So I kind of felt like the ecofeminist aspect wasn't so strong, precisely because they wanted it to be a much more personal take. So many of the essays here are kind of just broad reflections on what it meant to be connected to your environment and what it meant to be gendered in that kind of perspective. So it is an intersection of what it means to do kind of gendered work, gendered labor. In this sense, in this case, it's much more focused on caregiving, and also questioning how is it that the feminine is associated with nature, nurture, with the environment and caregiving and all that. What I really enjoyed is also about the idea of kin. So that is something that's explored a lot more here, the idea of what makes a kin. And it's pretty rare to find that kind of writing in Singapore, because the family structure here is pretty strongly reinforced by mainstream media and by basically everyone. The nuclear family structure, it is kind of mainstream logic. So I really enjoy how the book also tackled a lot of what it meant to be family, in sort of biological kind of nuclear ways, but also beyond that, with kind of non-biological kin but also non-human kin. So I enjoyed that. Making Kin, the title, was inspired by Donna Haraway, and I can see a little bit of that influence. I really enjoyed that. But overall, it is a very personal bunch of essays, very Singaporean in a way. There might be a lot of references here that if you're not Singaporean you might not really get, but at the same time I feel like maybe for the everyday Singaporean, they might not understand this book as much either because of how specific the perspective is. But for me, it is definitely something that appeals directly to someone like me, who has grown up as a woman in Singapore and is now dealing with a lot of themes of the environment. So that has a very specific niche, which I so happen to be very much a part of. I enjoyed it immensely, but really out of personal satisfaction. Whether I would recommend it to people, I think it would be very niche. You might not be able to appreciate it as much. But if you're someone that, you know, fulfills all those checklists of like, yes, you want to know more Singaporean perspectives, not just Singaporean but women perspectives in Singapore from an environmental and feminist slant, then this book ticks all of that. Like, it's very specific. Okay, the next book that I finished is Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. Okay, this is a bit of a disclaimer. I have been reading the book on and off for the past few months, and I really love it, and I really cherish it. But I finally finished the last 2 chapters this month, and I kind of feel like now, on hindsight, whether I would recommend this book. It is very beautiful writing, but it is pretty lengthy. Like, I realized that this book does expand a little bit, like it does go on for quite a long while, so it isn't a book that I would recommend for people who are a bit time pressed, but I do think that you have to savor this book slowly, in bits, and to just really enjoy the different vignettes that the author puts front for you. I have talked about this book so many times, but if you're someone that's looking to read about the environment, sort of a very great chemistry between sciences and the arts, like this gift of literary wisdom, then you would really appreciate this book, because I think Robin Wall Kimmerer, she's very well known as a very prominent figure in environmental studies, and especially in forwarding this idea that the arts and the science should really come together. Like, Indigenous knowledge and wisdom is actually really compatible and should be the way forward in a way that we think about the ecology and think about us as humans in this world. So definitely would recommend it, but it's just so happened that in the past 2 months I managed to finish the last 2 chapters, and that always happens for me. Like, I would read a book not to completion, but I would slowly read it over a few months before I finally complete the book and I can classify it as a book that I have completely finished. If you're someone that reads in a fast-paced manner, this book might not appeal to you. It is something that you need to take your time with, I feel. The next book that I finished is a book that was sent to me as an advanced reading copy, I guess, sort of. It's Moved by Parag, Khanna, How Mass Migration Will Reshape the World and What It Means for You. The author, Khanna, has actually written about the theme of migration many times before. I think he's also someone that has written about Singapore and has written about kind of like the rise of Asia in a kind of global politics manner. So this is a very much like global politics sort of book, very written for those people who are very interested in international affairs and international politics. For me, I don't really read these kinds of books. Once in a while I will, but oftentimes I avoid them because I feel like they speak too much from a very general point of view. Like, it's too generalized. I gave this book a chance, and it is still very much in that tone of like, here is my expertise, I've done this field of research, I've been a global strategy advisor for these great companies, I know what's up. And it keeps in that tone. Like, it's really a book written from that perspective, so do what you may with that perspective. But there's some insights here that I thought were pretty interesting for me to reflect on. Things like how mass migration is going to be affected by a couple of things. One of them is mostly going to be the climate crisis. Another is also about the kind of declining populations, things like aging population, birth rates falling, and what it means for different economies. And also, I think there's a question of what nationality might mean in the future when so many of us would have to move, and we have to kind of let go a little bit more of what it means to have national boundaries. And the fact that the whole pandemic has really deepened these tensions of national borders, the fact that that is gonna be what we are facing with, what we're grappling with as things get more and more unstable in terms of our locations, whether they are safe to live in. The author actually goes through different countries and highlights each of these countries, like issues and tensions, mostly talking about mature economies, so like Japan and all that. But I think it's really interesting to see how the trends are moving. Like, for example, in Japan, like, they used to be really like anti-immigrant, but nowadays, because of necessity, there is a lot more push to get more immigrants into the country to contribute to the economy, and I think that's really interesting. Singapore, as you know, is a country that's heavily reliant on foreign labor of all sorts, not just kind of corporate professional high-flying type, but also a lot of our manual labor and a lot of our kind of domestic labor is taken on by foreign labor. So this is a country that's pretty much built on foreign labor, and I think this book is pretty relevant for a Singaporean context as well, and how migration might look like in the future is going to be super interesting to see. I think for myself, I've never really considered migration, even though I pretty much come from an entire background of migration, and it's nice to see a broad trend analysis. The last book I want to talk about is The Day the World Stops Shopping: How Ending Consumerism Saves the Environment and Ourselves. This is a really random book that I found from the ebook catalog of my library, and I really enjoyed this book. If you've been on this channel for quite a bit, I actually talk a lot about like consumerism and growth and capitalism and all that. Really inspired by all the kind of very much more radical theory books that I've read, and these books are very theoretical, so I know that they're not very accessible for a lot of people, and I totally see that, and I also have been trying to find ways to make these ideas a lot more approachable. So this book is about consumption. It's more focused on the everyday kind of situations when we're facing consumption, and I really appreciate that. It kind of contextualizes consumption, how we can move away from a consumer society, away from that, and I feel like this book does a really good job in explaining it to a very general audience, and makes it super intriguing by all the different people that all the different types of people that the author interacts with, and a lot of the different stories. I also find that there's a lot of alternatives that are being proposed in the book, which is super good and useful, especially when you read a lot of theory and you're stuck as to how to really implement all these things in a practical manner. It's one of those books that connect a much more general audience to slightly more radical ideas through a very easygoing and pragmatic approach. One example would be like Naomi Klein's books. She writes in a very kind of journalistic way. It's still very serious, like her tone is still very serious, but her books are pretty much helping general audiences connect the dots between capitalism and climate change. And I feel like this book does a really good job in connecting the dots between what it means for slow living, degrowth, and consumer society. We still have to consume. Humans are always consuming, and we are always material beings, very materialistic beings, but the next immediate step that we can take is to become a de-consumer society, and that means kind of reinventing what it means to be a consumer, and then moving away from a consumer identity. And I really appreciate that this has eliminated that step for me, because yeah, I feel like I've been trying to be as slow living as possible, but it's very hard to articulate how that might look like for a large number of people. And the author has kind of already emphasized multiple times in the book that we need mass movements, like we need like a lot of people to opt into this de-consumer mindset and the slow living mindset for some sort of change to happen in the way that we shop or the way that we spend our leisurely time. I feel like that kind of fills a gap in my reading as well when it comes to economics, because again I was reading a lot of theoretical books, but this kind of filled the gap in the consumer identity gap, like talking about the everyday politics of being a consumer on an everyday level, but also talking about how that can look like at every single level. So that was really useful for me. That's the end of my wrap up. This video was quite rambly because I want to give each book as much thought as I can. Yeah, so the next wrap-up-ish video will probably be kind of an end of year best, like top 10 books somewhat. Yes, I won't be doing a 2021 like every book wrap-up because I find that that's too tiring. I did one for last year, you can watch it. I guess I sounded really like chaotic in that one, but yeah, so thanks for joining me in this video. I hope it was interesting, useful. I feel like nowadays I'm pretty bad at reviewing books. I don't know, but that's basically what I do on this channel. Thank you for watching. I hope that you found some interesting books here. and I hope to see you in the next video as well. Hope you're staying well. Hope you're doing well today. If not, I do hope you get a good night's rest tonight and you get to have a better day tomorrow. If not, it's alright. We're all here trying. And yeah, see you in the next video. And that will probably be the new year. So happy 2022 soon, I hope. Yeah. Bye.